Okay, so I hope you enjoyed my little video intro. I was going for that 1980s video game look. In this lesson, I'm going to explain how to get a Drupal 8 site up and running for development, specifically using the tools Composer, Git, and the Bash command line utility on Windows 10. Now, you can use any operating system that you want. That just happens to be what I use for my local development. Now, normally I do run the development on a local laptop, but then I push it to a physical Linux-based server to handle anything that I'm going to use for production or something that will be seen from other users on the internet. Now, this tutorial itself may seem a little bit off topic from chem informatics in general, or from future videos from within my research group, but the reason that I wanted to cover this Drupal install is because it's an excellent platform to build your own electronic lab notebook or to publish your research with a system that allows everything to be customized. Many pre-made ELNs or electronic lab notebooks do not allow customization the way that Drupal does all the way down to the core. But if you prefer something that's already built, then Drupal may not be the best route for you. And I would assume that's the case with a lot of scientists that just want to get their research out to the public, and they don't want to spend too much time worrying about the web development. So I will go ahead and tag this video in a way that anyone that's wanting to work with Drupal will benefit, and not just those that work in science and chem informatics, because Drupal has been proven to work in many different areas, ranging from a simple website builder to very complex multi-site platforms that are capable of hosting all kinds of web-based services. In fact, we've had great success with using Drupal to run classroom settings in the past. So if you plan to use Drupal, then I hope this video will help you with reaching your goals. So start with going to the Drupal.org website and read as much documentation as you can handle. It's very thorough. There's tutorials. It basically takes you from the ground up to the more advanced level stuff. So if this is your first Drupal install, don't get irritated if you run into some problems. Um, okay, so the next thing is to start with checking your prerequisites. So make sure that you can run a database, a web server, PHP, and obviously you need a compatible operating system to run each of those. Most people run MySQL as the database and Apache as the web server. You can change some of those around, but it may be a little more difficult. You may run into some technical challenges with that. So if you're able to watch this video, then chances are you have a computer or a mobile device that's capable of running Drupal in some way or another, or at least interacting with the interface. Now, the first thing that I want to look at is Composer, and that was one of the tools that I mentioned we're going to be working with on this install. And Composer is recommended with Drupal 8. In fact, it's used all the way down at the core. It's needs to be installed on the server before you install your Drupal site, but you can go ahead and grab the files before installing Composer. I just recommend that you go ahead and have Composer installed. On many systems, you may already have the PHP Composer tool installed, so if you switch over to your command line, you can quickly check. Now, I'm using the Windows 10 Linux subsystem, so I have to go into Bash before I have access to it. So now that I'm in Bash, I can just type Composer version, and I can quickly see that I'm running Composer version 1.4.3, and it gives me a date and timestamp on when it was installed, or at least last updated. If nothing shows up, then you may not have Composer installed. I went ahead and installed Composer globally so I can access it from pretty much any directory within my Linux system. You may want to just install it within a specific directory. You can do it either way, and the documentation on the website at Git Composer shows you how to do both. In fact, you can just copy some of the commands straight over to your command line, paste them, and you can have Composer installed pretty quickly. So the next thing that I want to talk about is Drupal and Git. And there are several ways to start with your Drupal install. One way, or the way that it was done a long time ago, was to just download the compressed system file from the website to your server, uncompress it, and then start running the installer scripts. The other way, which has been preferred by developers for quite a long time, is to use a versioning system such as Git to acquire the files. And I am going to use Git specifically for that purpose. Now, before you grab your Drupal project files, there are two specific repositories that I want you to take a look at. And the first one is the verbatim mirror. And this is a repository that is exactly the same as the ones that are on Drupal.org. And it comes with a very basic Composer JSON file. It doesn't come with a lot of the updated scaffolding files. It doesn't come with Drush. It doesn't come with Drupal console. But if you're an advanced user with Drupal, then you may want to go with this because you like to set up things, all your configuration yourself. Now, the way that I'm going to install Drupal is I'm going to use the Drupal-composer/Drupal-project. And what this does is it puts together quite a few things that you can use to kind of get going a little faster. And for me, the fact that it's got Drush and Drupal console right from the beginning when you install it, that's kind of a big plus. Another thing is that it will take care of some of the permission issues as it's installing. It'll go ahead and set up your files directory. It creates the settings.php, so you don't have to make a copy of that and then start putting in your database information. So I highly recommend that you look into this repository as something that you may want to install. Now, I'm going to go ahead and move over to my working web directory and make sure that I don't have any other test sites going. Okay, so I have a blank working directory. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and install my Drupal site using Composer. So I will type in Composer create project Drupal Composer Drupal-project 8.x-dev. Okay, so this next piece that you're going to enter in is whatever you want that directory to be called. And in my case, it's going to be the URL that my site is going to live at. So on my local development, I'll use localhost / whatever folder I put in. So I'm going to type in test. Now I want stability, dev, no interaction, and these are copied straight from the website. So, and this will take a second to install. Okay, so now that everything has been downloaded, the first thing I want to look at is I want to look at some of the files and folders that were created. So here we see test. We'll go into test, and we can see that there's a Drush folder, scripts, vendor, and web. Now, if you are used to working with Drupal 7 on the command line and not using Composer, then this may look a little unfamiliar to you. But if you move into the web folder, which contains all of the Drupal stuff, that should look a lot more familiar to you. And that's because Drupal is working in a subdirectory of the main Composer directory that manages all of the PHP dependencies and things. So I'm going to go back up to the main directory, and I'm going to type in git status, which should give me an error. And that's because this install, or at least this process, did not create a repository. So I'm going to go ahead and create a repository and type in git status, and you can see all of the untracked files. It does not include the sites folder and a few others that would be for users that add personal files or maybe files that contain passwords and things like that. So you don't have to worry about manually adding those. So I'm going to go ahead and add these. So if I type git status, I now have several track files, and I will go ahead and make an initial commit. So git commit, I'm going to leave a message. So initial commit prior to install. Okay, so that's done. I'll type git status again, and you can see that there's nothing else to commit, and I am on branch master. Now, for any changes in development work that I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and create a second branch because I don't want to do these changes on the master branch. So I'm going to type git branch test, and everything will go on to my test branch. So if I type git branch and list them, you'll see that there's a test and a master branch. Now the asterisk is next to the master branch, and I want to work on the test branch, so I need to move that asterisk over to the test. So I will type git checkout test. And if you're familiar with Git processes, then you may want to skip through a little bit of this video. So if I type git branch and list them again, there's now two branches, master and test, and the asterisk is next to test, showing that I am working on the test branch. Now I need to push my initial commit to a repository somewhere else so that I can have a backup. So I don't have any remote set up, so if I type git remote, nothing happens. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my GitLab instance, and I'm going to make a new project, and I'm going to call it test, and my description will be test. I can leave it at private or public, either one. It doesn't matter. I'm pretty much the only one that accesses this. Once I get a project to at least a level that I want to share it with the community, then I often push it to something like GitHub or Bitbucket. But for just my private little projects that I work on, this works just fine. So now I want to copy my SSH path, and I will go back into my command line, and I want to create that remote. So I will type git remote add, and I will just call this GitLab, and I will paste in my SSH URL. So if I type git remote, I now have a remote called GitLab. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to push my initial commit to my GitLab server. So if you're working on Windows 10 using the subsystem, you may have to enable your SSH agent before you can use it. I haven't set that up to automatically start some of the services on this when I load into my bash shell. So now if you're not using SSH and you're using the HTTPS, then you would just push and type in your password with your username. But I need to go ahead and start, let's see here, money sign, open parentheses, SSH-agent-s for start, and that should start my SSH agent. Now, another thing I have to do is I have to manually add in my SSH key each time because I haven't automated that either. So, SSH add, and then I go to my path. And I already have a GitLab key set up, so that adds my key. I'm still in my working directory, so I can type git remote update, make sure that it fetches everything. That all looks good, so now I can do git push. I will type in my remote, and then I want to push the test branch, and that should go fairly quickly. Okay, so I've now pushed my test branch. Now you can see that this blank repository, if I reload, everything looks good. So now it is a exact clone of the Drupal-composer/Drupal-project repository. So Now I want to go back into my command line and do a few more things. So we've taken care of two of the tools. Now while I'm here, I want to show that you can type in Composer outdated, and this will show all of the packages that have red are in critical need of update, so I would go ahead and take care of those pretty quickly. There are a lot of different commands that you can use for updating some of your packages through Composer, and you want to be careful on which ones to include dependencies or not to include dependencies. And you also want to be careful on not just running the Composer update command for all of your packages, because if you update too many things at once, you're liable to break your site. So I prefer to update things one at a time, check how things are working, and then go to the next package. So when it comes to production environments, really the only thing that I ever push to a production environment would be the web folder, and that's because I don't need all of the Composer managers on my production environment. I just want the site and all of the stuff that goes with the site to be uploaded to the production, because then I don't have to worry about trying to include all of the security measures for Composer with the Drupal website. So you may want to keep that in mind. So now the first thing that we're going to do after we have gotten our repository set up is to look at some of the configuration before we go and run the installer scripts. So you can actually, going back to Composer, you can also type Composer show, or what is it, Composer. I'm still a little bit new with Composer, but you can well, that should have been the right command. So, oh, I'm in the web directory, so I tend to do that a lot. So if I just type Composer show, it will show all of the packages, whether they are outdated or they are up to date. So, alright, so now I want to go into my Apache folder, and I'm going to show you how there we go. So I've already got a test comp file set up, and I want to show you what I'm doing to make sure that I'm going directly to the Drupal. Now, these permissions are pretty open. They would be a little more limited on a production server, but the main thing that I want to show you is that I'm using a redirect match to take the test/web and make that as just test. So that way I don't have to go to localhost/test/web to go to my Drupal site when I want to test things. All I have to do is type localhost/test, and that works with all of the subdirectories that are a part of the web directory. So you may want to keep that in mind if you install Composer the way that I did, because it puts the Drupal site into a subdirectory instead of making it the main working directory. So once that's taken care of, we can then move back into our Drupal site, which was test, and then remember you have to go to web. Now you can go to the site's default, and it's already set up a blank settings PHP file. So I want to just take this and do sudo nano settings, and I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and I want to type in, let's see, actually I can go ahead and find the blank that's not what I want. I can take this one And I'll just go ahead and copy that and paste that in at the bottom. Okay, so I have database, default array, driver. Actually, don't want that. I want MySQL. Oh, and I have to uncomment all these. So my driver is going to be MySQL. My database name I will just call test. Username test. Password test. Host. I don't need anything in the prefix. I do want to add a namespace. So I will type namespace equals Drupal 4. Let's see here, I've got a host, prefix, password, username, database. I can go ahead and put in a port. And that will just be 3306. And I want to type in standard. Okay, so I'm going to save that. And hopefully everything should work. Now the settings really shouldn't affect whether Apache starts or not. Alright, so now we need to do some stuff with MySQL. So I'm going to do sudo service mysql start. Should log in with home, and I should be good to log in. Okay, so mysql-u, I'm going to go ahead and log in with root. Type in my password. And the first thing I want to do is show databases. Okay, make sure I don't have any test databases. And then I'm going to do create database test character set UTF-8 collate UTF-8 general CI. Alright, so now show databases. I should have a test database. Now, I've already made a test user that I use quite often, so I will just put, let's see here, grant all privileges on test to test at localhost. Okay, so now I can get out of MySQL, and I should be able to go and load up a localhost /test. see here. Okay, so to save you the hassle of waiting while I fixed what was wrong with the install, I went back into the settings.php and I noticed that I had put an ampersand sign instead of a money sign. Also, I rearranged a few things, so this should be what I'm using as my install. So when I go back, the Drupal installer just loads right up. So thank you for watching my video, and I hope this helps.